Okay, you're live. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night,
Thanks.
Danielle.
Good night, thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Good evening, everyone. This is the Red Hook Town Board meeting of Tuesday, November 9th, 2021. Would you be kind enough to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Okay, you're live. Have a good night, everybody.
I pledge
Good
allegiance
night, thank
to
you.
the
To the
flag
flag
of
the United
States
of
of
America.
America,
Town Board meeting
and to the republic
Tuesday,
for
November
which it
9th,
stands,
2021.
one nation,
One nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice.
Have a good night,
For all.
everybody.
I pledge
Good night,
allegiance
thank
to
you.
the
to the
flag
flag
Oh, somebody's got an echo going
Okay,
on.
I can hear everything
to the
running in
republic.
on a delay.
and well.
That was weird.
Mhm.
We're good.
I guess
We're
we're all
good.
caught up. I don't hear it anymore, so it must be fixed.
Okay, echo is fixed. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, folks, thanks very much. And for the folks at home, I'll do a screen share here so you all can see what we'll be discussing tonight. Okay. Very good. We have a public hearing tonight on some ideas for this current round of community development block grant monies. And for the folks at home, there is a federally funded program that applies to low and moderate income neighborhoods and or projects that remove obstacles for persons of protected class, those who have special needs. And we'll be discussing some ideas about that. We have just some resolutions authorizing some contracts. As we spoke about in previous meetings, we were successful in obtaining grants for generators, one here for town hall and one for the community center. I should say $25,000 each towards the total cost of installing a generator at each location. That's very important for the community center. They are also our cooling and warming center. They're also a friendship center, a county friendship center. And so having reliable power at that important institution, it will make quite the difference. We also obtained some monies through Municipal Innovation Grant for St. Margaret's, making it ADA accessible. And so we have an agreement with the county on that we'll be authorizing tonight. We also started a couple of years back working with the county to do some procurement where they assist us on just certain projects, not all purchasing. And so we're just extending that agreement. Same with the SPCA, who is our dog control office, and we have an agreement to house any loose animals there as well. I should say loose pets, dogs and cats, as we got a call today about goats. They don't do goats. And then community development block grant program we discussed as well. And then a further discussion and hopefully some finalization of short-term rental potential legislation for public consumption. And that's about it for tonight. Announcements. So why don't I just quickly, before we do the supervisor's report, because I'm afraid I'm going to forget announcements. Our next scheduled town board meeting is supposed to be the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. And so what I propose to you town board members, with your blessing, since it is approaching Thanksgiving, is that we reschedule that to Tuesday, November 30th. And are we all okay with that? Can we vote to approve rescheduling the 24th to the 30th? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Bill. A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Jacob Testa,
Aye.
Bill O'Neill,
Aye.
myself, aye. Okay, so that takes care of that announcement. All right, why don't we go into the supervisor's report for the folks at home. The first meeting of the month, we try to summarize for you the state of finances for your community. And we give you the rough total numbers. We started the month, this is for the period ending October 31st. We started the month with an opening balance of 7.8 million. We had receipts of 321,000, disbursements of 394. We have a remaining balance of 7,760,000. That's spread over many funds. Some of those funds are community preservation funds, which used for purchasing development rights or recreation spaces in the town, as well as our general funds, our fire, our water, our streetlight authority. We have some budget adjustments that Ann Conway has prepared. Board members, I don't know if you have any questions about them. I did want to add to that, as I may have mentioned, for you and for the folks at home. I had asked at a previous meeting if we would hold off on making some specific recommendations regarding equipment related to highway until we saw what was coming out of Washington. And now we're happy to say that the infrastructure bill has been passed, 11.5 billion. So I read is earmarked for New York State as it relates to road projects. And so in consultation with the highway super, my recommendation would be that we make it a budget adjustment tonight, in addition to the ones in front of you for the backhoe. Unfortunately, the village doesn't feel they can share their backhoe with us. I'll just leave it at that. So we'll be buying our own backhoe again, replacing the existing one. And so my recommendation would be that we approve a budget adjustment to move $55,000 over from the B contingency, which now has a large amount, and move it over to the DB capital. And then we will use $50,000 from the CHIPS money that's appropriated for 2022, because we're expecting more money coming through those programs as part of the infrastructure bill. And then there'll also be revenue estimated somewhere around $15,000 for the sale of the existing backhoe. So I'd like to add that budget adjustment, $55,000 from B contingency over to DB capital, and a budget adjustment in 2022 of $50,000 for CHIPS. Any questions about the supervisor's report? You have your variance reports for the month as well. No additional information. We are working with the federal government and census to try and correct the initial census figures that were given. We don't expect that change correction to take place until about 5 quarters from now. Okay. If not, is there a motion to accept the supervisor's report?
Move.
Along with the budget.
Along with the changes?
Yep,
Okay.
along with the budget adjustments.
So move.
Thank you, Bill O'Neill. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Christine. All in favor, Jacob Testa
Aye.
and Bill Hamel.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, we also have the clerk's report. Deanna, would you be kind enough to read off the clerk's report for the month?
Okay, the town clerk's report for the period of October 1st to October 31st, 2021. Total local shares remitted to the $4,934.50. Amount paid to New York State Ag and Market to the spay neuter program, $26. Amount paid to New York State Department of Health for marriage licenses, $112.50. Amount paid to New York State Environmental Conservation for hunting and fishing licenses, $743. Total state, county, and local revenues, $5,816. And I have two vouchers. September 21, certify that vouchers numbered 28,152 to 28,261 processed in the month of September are an accurate reporting of the abstracts approved for payment by the town board. October 2021, I hereby certify vouchers numbered 28,262 to 28,363 processed in the month of October 2021 are an accurate reporting of the abstracts approved for payment by the town board.
Very good. Thank you very much, Deanna. Is there a motion to accept the town clerk's report?
So moved.
second,
Thank you, Bill O'Neill. All in favor, Bill Hamel,
aye,
Jacob Testa,
Aye.
myself, aye. Okay, folks, public comments. We don't have any public comments as of yet. So why don't we jump into agenda item number 1? And again, as I mentioned, these are just resolutions approving the agreements with the county. So I don't know, does anybody have any question about these materials?
Mr. Supervisor, the public hearing was scheduled for 7:35. I'm thinking you should probably open that.
We're a few minutes late. Okay, why don't we do that? So we'll wait on agenda item number 1 and the public hearing. Deanna, do you want to read the notice for the public hearing, please?
Notice of public hearing, Town of Red Hook. Please take notice that a public hearing will be held by the town board of the Town of Red Hook on November 9th, 2021 at 7:35 PM local time at the Town Hall, 7340 South Broadway, Red Hook, New York, 12571, to hear all interested persons regarding the 2022 Community Development Block Grant application. Due to the ongoing COVID pandemic, the Town Hall is closed to the general public except by appointment until further notice. Pursuant to New York laws of 2021, Chapter 417, the public will not be permitted to attend in person. Board members are expected to participate in the public hearing via teleconference or video conference. Please refer to the meeting agenda to be posted on the town website at www.redhook.org, listing the specific link which will allow the public to view and listen to the proceedings live, which is expected to be available at www.pandatv23.org. Click on Watch Live. All interested persons will be given an opportunity to be heard as follows. 1, the public is encouraged to submit written comments by email or telephone in advance of the hearing to townclerk@redhook.org and 845-758-4606 by 4:00 PM the day of the hearing. Please note 2022 Community Development Block Grant application. 2, written comments may be dropped in the town's Dropbox in advance of the hearing at the Town Hall, 7340 South Broadway, Red Hook, New York, 12571 by 4:00 PM the day of the hearing. Please observe the recommendations of the CDC regarding distancing and use of masks. 3, all comments so received in advance of the hearing will be noted in the hearing record. Interested persons may also comment by email or telephone to supervisor@redhook.org and 845-758-4622 on the date of the hearing from the time of opening the hearing until the close of the hearing. By order of the Town Board of the Town of Red Hook dated October 12th, 2021, Deanna Cochran, Town Clerk, Town of Red Hook.
Thank you very much, Deanna. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. We did not receive any comments about a potential CDBG application. In the past, we've discussed the possibility of creating a crossing along with a sidewalk from Rec Park East to West. In discussions with the county, they feel that it does not technically qualify for the CDBG as there's no obstacle to be removed. That's a barrier for those with physical challenges. And so they're encouraging us to apply for that project in the springtime under the Municipal Innovation Grant Program. And so that's good news that there's a potential source of funding, matching funding for that. So one of the other things that was discussed is the septic and water needs, both at St. Margaret's. These are municipal owned buildings, St. Margaret's, and here at Town Hall, some septic work, as well as pathway, an accessible pathway to get to the St. Margaret's building. And so we have until tomorrow actually to correspond with the county and let them know about what we intend to apply for. The application's not due till the 1st of December, but in consultation with our engineer, who's got a lot of experience with applying for these CDBG grants, that's kind of what we've come up with as a potential project for the folks at home. It's been a few years now that we've been wanting to do work on St. Margaret's, and we have in fact received a grant to increase ADA accessibility and working on achieving potable water and making sure that the septic system is up to standards is an important part of that process. So that's for the folks at home. Okay, not seeing any comments for tonight's public hearing. Why don't we give it a second?
Robert, if we were to apply for the pathway at St. Margaret's, can we do anything for ADA qualified parking there as a part of this application?
Well, we have some under that other grant that we've already received.
Oh, that's got parking in that one? I thought that was just,
Minimal parking, initial
okay,
ADA, yeah.
okay.
But to increase the parking there, we can do that. In fact, that's something that Brandy has discussed, is maybe doing some permeable parking in addition to what's there.
That'd be great.
So, okay, I'll encourage her to try and include that. The maximum, just so the folks at home know, the maximum that we can apply for is 150,000, which used to go a long way, but nowadays doesn't. So
Well,
very
if we could
good.
if we were to be successful and we got money for parking in this one, we put it together with the other one, and then we could have some parking there, because I would hate to see a huge parking lot there. I don't think it goes, would go well with the historic nature. So the
Right.
permeable parking might be a great option for there.
Very good. All right, not seeing any public hearing comments at this time. I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Bill Hamel. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Christine Kane. All in favor, Jacob Testa,
Aye.
Bill O'Neill,
Aye.
and myself. All right, thank you. Let's skip back down to where's our information? Okay. We're now going to skip to agenda item number 1. Deanna, would you be kind enough to let me know what resolution number this is?
77.
77. Okay, we've been busy. 77, it's authorizing the execution of an agreement with the County of Dutchess for Town Hall and Community Center Generators Project through the Municipal Investment Grant Program, which I have already described, and I so move. Is there a second?
second,
All in favor? Jacob Testa,
Aye.
Bill O'Neill,
Aye.
Bill Hamel.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next up is a similar agreement with the county. This one pertains to the accessibility.
Sir, I think if you scroll, there should be a second resolution,
There.
as part of item 1.
Oh, right, there was an addendum. That's right. So
Right.
there's,
Can we address that next?
yeah, before we go on to
Yeah,
the St. Margaret's, we have an agreement, a side agreement that we'll have with the community center. Because we will be managing the work.
I think it's. Keep going.
Did I already pass it?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think
This is gonna be another resolution.
more. All these documents. There's the
County
addendum.
agreement, right?
Sorry?
Yep, there's our addendum, so we should go back, is a resolution ahead of that, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hmm, where is it? Let's see.
Hang on.
Hmm,
I thought you had it.
we're getting there. If
No,
I can
it's-
figure out
it
what
must be
page it's
out of
on.
order in this batch. No, that's the execution of the agreement.
The addendum's on page 52. Nope, that's St. Margaret's.
Where do we?
That
go?
resolution not get in the pack?
It may not have gotten in the pack, so let's
Um,
take it up on a separate screen share, shall we? There's the.
You can put the addendum up there, but which is the substance of what the resolution would
Yeah.
approve.
So let's see if we have the resolution on physical batch.
What's on page 54? That looks like a resolution. No, up one.
Yeah, that's the ADA for St.
That's the
Oh,
Margaret.
ADA
that's a different one,
standard.
sorry.
That's a different one. No, it's right.
No worries. So yeah, this second resolution somehow didn't make it there. That's the execution of the agreement between the town and the Red Hook Community Center. And that would be resolution number 78. And Vishal, did you want to do a screen share of that?
I don't think I have that one because I didn't set that up for this. So
Well, I will.
give you the substance of it though. So you have the addendum there, and the resolution is that the town and the community center entered into an agreement for services dated March 15, 2019, and the town wishes to amend the agreement with an addendum to the agreement, copy of which is on file with the clerk, and that's the addendum that you have on the screen while you did. Yes. So therefore be it resolved, Supervisor McKeon, or in his absence, Deputy Supervisor O'Neill is hereby authorized and directed to execute the addendum in substantially the form on file with the clerk, with such changes as shall not materially affect the substance thereof and which shall be consistent with the terms of this resolution to take effect immediately. So that's the resolution number 78.
Very good. And I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, Christine Kane,
Aye.
Jacob Testa,
Aye.
Bill Hamel.
Aye.
Okay, and I'll get that resolution up on the screen before the night is over so everyone can see it physically. We're now on resolution 79. As mentioned by Christine, this is authorizing the agreement between the town and the county, again with the work associated with St. Margaret's. Very short agreement. And I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, Jacob Testa,
Aye.
Bill O'Neill,
Aye.
Bill Hamel.
Aye.
All right, moving right along. We're now to the resolution approving the extension of the purchasing agreement. Nope. A long way to go for that one. You have 82, is that what you have? There we go. Resolution number 80. Authorizing the execution of an extension of intermunicipal agreement with the Dutchess County regarding assistance from the county with central purchasing services. We've done this now for a couple of years. This would extend the agreement for another 12 months from November 1st to October 31st, and it relates to assistance with procurement. And I so move. Is there a second?
Second, but you might want to share your screen again, so it's up on the screen.
Oh, thank you. That would help, wouldn't it? You would think that I would.
After you went through all that work to find it.
Yes, exactly. Okay. That's 80. There's been a motion. There's been a second. All in favor, Bill Hamel,
Aye.
Bill O'Neill,
Aye.
Jacob Testa, myself.
Aye.
Okay. We're now moving right along. Dog control housing agreements. So before we entertain the resolution, this is 81, by the way, dated 11/9. Can we have a little discussion about some fees, some changes in fees? And by the way, they combined, you'll notice, town board members, this year they've combined both the housing and the dog control agreements into one document. Can we talk about the fees as it relates to veterinary expenses? Chris, Bill Hamel.
Yeah, the copy that they had sent over to us basically made a change that they have control over the disposition of an animal. And in their change, we used to have a fee schedule and a cap. They removed that, and it's a little concerning because we have no control over how much we're going to get charged should they decide to keep a dog for some indefinite period of time. And historically, it's always sort of been on the dog owner, assuming we identify who the dog owner is, or at some point, we reimburse the SPCA, if we don't know who the dog owner is. But the version that they sent over really eliminated that. And I've written to them, I've called them, I've received no response from them asking what the justification was for that change. Because they may have a justification, they just didn't share it with us. But I believe that before we agree to such an agreement, I would like to at least get their input. And I think we should probably insert a fee schedule or a cap of some kind that limits the amount of exposure financially the town has for housing an animal that they take control of. It's my 2 cents. I don't know how other board members feel about it.
Well, I can see the version we have now has those fees not being assigned to us because we made that change.
Okay.
Because we didn't agree to that. And as you said, there was no discussion about that.
Did we place a cap?
No, we don't agree to it. I think we've got veterinary care for dogs that are not redeemed by the owner. The town will not be responsible for any administered medical care fees incurred during the redemption holding period.
Well, I can agree with that.
But just,
I think you must be looking at the old agreement because we didn't try to rewrite their agreement. We were just showing changes from the prior agreement so that we could see what the distinctions were in what had been in the prior agreement.
well, I'm looking at veterinary care and emergency veterinary care. Is there another?
Right, that's an old agreement that was provided for comparison of what the
Okay.
prior language was, right?
Well,
Yeah.
they did not provide us their new version with red line strikeout, but I think we should send back a version with our red line strikeout showing that we either going to put in a cap or that we assume that they go back to the old version that we had used previously. And we have till the end of the calendar year to get this completed. So we're not out of, we're not rushing up against the calendar here. But I think it's important that we get this issue resolved one way or another.
Well, I'm inclined to leave any responsibility for fees upon the town out of this agreement and renew it. I mean, they didn't approach us and they didn't discuss it with us, so I'm inclined, if they want to continue to contract with the town of Red Hook to keep it the way it was, and then at some point, if they want to have a discussion. I hear what you're saying, Bill, but it is November and the holidays are coming upon us, and I'd like to have an agreement in place, and I just assume continue what we had before. Does that make sense? And then
Well, we can vote on that, right?
yeah, I think we can go ahead and do that if you're comfortable with that. And then if we have to revisit this, if they persuade you, Bill, and you persuade the rest of us that we need to be responsible for some of those vet fees, then I guess we could take it up to amend it. What do the rest of you think about that?
I think that makes sense. I don't want us to be on the hook for an unending amount of bills. You don't have it up on the screen either.
Oh. Sorry. Let's get that up on the screen. The folks that really.
Looks like the only fees that the town would be responsible for are the boarding fees. And it says that it runs from the period from the date of seizure until the expiration of the applicable redemption period. I don't know what the limits of that redemption period are.
They're in our
section
code, right? Mhm. And they're statutory, so.
And do you know
but
offhand
it
what
was-
those limits are? Like what the periods are?
Not offhand. I can look it up.
But I think it was the vet bill section.
Yeah, it's the vet bill
cost.
that changed, correct?
And that's expensive.
Well, it could be.
Yeah, it could be.
It's
Right,
really-
but the way that I read it was, we don't really, they're not going to consult with us before they do vet bills. It just sounds like they're going to do what they think best. And then we would essentially have to pay those bills. So Robert, do you want a motion to renew the agreement the existing agreement, to extend the existing agreement terms with the SPCA? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think that is what I'm thinking. And then if they want to have a further discussion, we've reached out to them. We haven't heard back from them.
And Chris, would
do
that
you-
work, Chris?
Do you object to the rest of the changes that they made or only the changes that relate to the vet fees?
Just the changes to the vet.
So
as
you
far as
would-
I'm concerned, yeah,
Right, so you would accept the new agreement, but
right.
modify
Right.
the agreement to reflect the old provisions regarding the vet fees.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So resolution subject to that condition.
And that's resolution 81, I believe, right, Deanna? Correct?
Correct.
Correct. Thank you, Deanna. Okay, approving dog control and housing services agreement between the town of Red Hook and Dutchess County SPCA as modified tonight. Nice and move.
I'll
There a
second
second? Thank you, Bill Hamel. All in favor, Christine Kane,
Aye.
Bill O'Neill,
Aye.
Jacob Testa.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The last is resolution, the last, number 5 rather, the next. It relates to the Community Development Block Grant application. We discussed some of the possibilities. I guess what I'm looking for is for you to authorize me to continue to work with Brandy to develop those facility projects for both Town Hall and St. Margaret's. And
So moved.
up to $150,000. Facilities improvement, municipal facilities improvement, we'll call it. Thank you, Christine. And second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Belinda. All in favor, Jacob Testa,
Aye.
Bill Hamel,
aye.
and myself, that's resolution 82. Okay, we are moving right along. Good work, folks. Short-term rentals, so why don't we do a quick little recap of where the short-term rental proposed legislation is now, where it's moved from and to, the sort of a, for the folks at home. So the town of Red Hook, like many municipalities, has been struggling with how to regulate short-term rentals in the community, recognizing that it's a new feature of the shared economy, and want to both welcome it and to make sure that it's in our community in the most intelligent way possible. So the proposed legislation now, from sort of a bird's eye view, is that short-term rental, that is any rental for overnight accommodation for less than 30 days. You're welcome to rent out your place for more than 30 days. That's just a rental and not governed by any of this legislation. But if it's shorter than 30 days, it will be allowed. There'll be a one-time exception in all districts. So regardless of the size or the nature of the community, whether it's a residential neighborhood or it's somewhere out in the rural parts, there'll be a one-time exception. You'll still need to go ahead and register the property and indicate the dates, and but it will be allowed in all districts now. In the proposed legislation, you'll need to otherwise get a permit. You won't need to have a special permit in most instances, but you will need to meet certain conditions, like you'll need to have renting out no more than a certain amount of bedrooms that you are legally allowed to have in your home or property anyway. The septic needs to be able to handle the activity. Parking, there needs to be appropriate amount of parking, so on and so forth. So there will be still some requirements that typically are found in the special permit process, but there won't be that lengthy going in front of the planning board process that happens sometimes with special permits. Different districts, again, we're looking to try to protect the neighborhoods, making sure that there are neighbors in neighborhoods, and looking at those districts differently, and not encouraging the short-term rental unhosted in those districts, not encouraging even hosted for more than the one-time exception. In the more rural parts of town, the 3-acre and 5-acre districts, looking at allowing hosted and unhosted short-term rentals, provided that it is the primary residence and limited to a certain amount of days per year. So hosted and unhosted. Hosted means you're somewhere on the property, whether it's in the main house or if you have a guest cottage, you could conceivably be in the guest cottage during that rental. Unhosted means at the time that you're renting out the property, you're not on the property. And there is some language that speaks of making sure that there is somebody who's near to the property in case there is an issue. There is also an exception to the primary residence, and that's in the case now of an adjacent property to a farm operation. So it's allowing for a farm stay if the property, this is 3-acre, 5-acre, is directly bordering the active farm operation. And obviously, a farmer can't live in 2 places at once, so it couldn't be a primary residence. So in that case, that would not be a requirement to have a farm stay short-term rental. And short-term rentals are encouraged on agricultural properties as part of agritourism. And I'm sure as folks at home know, lots of tourism and lots, frankly, of capital investment in our economy is due to the resurgence and the creativity of many of our farmers and farm properties here in town. And so one of the things that we wanted to encourage when we changed our zoning to have an agricultural business district, we wanted to give accessory uses. This is one of them. To agricultural properties to help support farms and make sure that they would continue into the future, as we at the same time worked hard to protect the canvas that they're working off of. So I think that's sort of a summary. I hope I've got that right, just for the folks at home, just sort of a generalization of what the proposed legislation now looks like. So for town board members and for Chris Shaw, and Chris, thank you, and Michelle Worth for working so hard on these drafts. And I think what we have in front of us now is a lot easier to implement, a lot easier to enforce, a lot clearer for folks at home to understand. Of course, zoning is never easy, but this is a lot easier than I think what was first in front of us. And so why don't we start taking some questions about the latest drafts and any suggestions or comments from town board members. Who would like to go first? Bill Hamel, would you like to go first?
Sure. I only have 2 questions really for discussion. In section 112.5, subparagraph K, it says no STR may be rented more than an aggregate of 150 days per year.
Okay.
And my question is, I've looked at other municipalities' STR rules, and some are far more restrictive than that. And I don't have the answer for what's the right number. I do know, having personal experience when I worked for the state tax department, how domiciles are defined. If the number goes too high, it's arguably no longer your domicile. You could claim it as your primary residence for, say, voting, but it's not where you lay your head most nights of the year. And there's a series of tests that are done. One's called the teddy bear test. It's near and dear where you keep your most prized possessions or property. There's a series of things. Unfortunately, there's no state law that sets forth all the criteria to determine your domicile. It's a series of indicia. But having gone through one of those cases in my career, you start pushing that number higher, it raises questions. So it's really a comfort level for us, and also making sure that we can enforce. I'm okay with 150 days, but I don't know what the other board members feel. I know that some communities like the village of Rhinebeck, Woodstock, other places have been way more restrictive in terms of the number and how many. Like Woodstock has a lottery system. They're currently in a moratorium, actually, but they have a lottery system for how many people can actually do it, and then how many nights a year it can be done. I think 150 is actually fairly permissive, but I'm okay with it. So I'll open that up
Any,
for
any,
discussion.
any thoughts on that limitation? Whether it should be lower or increased? Christine?
Bill, when you were investigating, did you, the like Woodstock or any of the other ones they just mentioned, did they maybe start out with the higher number and lower it, do you know? Or did they just start out with that lower number?
Woodstock started, theirs was a lottery system, and it was pretty restrictive. So there's only so many homes that could do it. But they did have a number of days. And they, I think it was 2 or 3 months ago, actually, because of issues with, I'm not sure whether it was enforcement related or it was getting a little crazy there, but they actually subjected the town of Woodstock to a 9-month moratorium. So they're not allowing it right now at all. In Rhinebeck, in the village, they have they have not changed their number, but it's not a high number for the number of nights a year. Maybe Bill O'Neill remembers what that number is, but it's pretty tight. And and I've seen others in other communities, and I do get concerned that sometimes you make something so onerous that it's a way of saying no without actually saying no. And I don't think we want to be in that position. I think we need to be reasonable and fair. And, I wouldn't go much higher than 150 or 160, just because it gets into the question of then really where does that person domicile? But, would you be comfortable with 120? Or, I mean, that's really what I think Village of Rhinebeck, I thought it was maybe 90 at most. It was really quite restrictive. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it really depends on what we're all comfortable with.
Well, I mean, if you were, there's, 52 weekends. So if you did
Right.
Friday and Saturday nights, that you're talking about, 114, is that what that is?
104, yeah.
104, yeah. So
And then you
I
have
guess that's a
Sunday.
comparison. So 104 would be something if you were just supplementing your income by renting something out on the weekends, and
Add in the
150,
Yeah, and you could add in the 3-day weekends. I think there's 10 of those.
right,
So yeah, you're pushing around 120.
right. So you're just saying, so the other extra 30 days that we have in our draft now, are you thinking that changes it somewhat to, or that's on the border of sort of becoming like a real business as opposed to a
I think so.
supplementing income sort of thing?
I think intuitively that feels that way to me. And I
Mhm.
also get concerned about enforceability when you get to a certain number. Then, is it really somebody's domicile? Are they going to pass the state tax department's tests for a domicile? And you can go to their website. There's a whole list of criteria, things that the state looks at to determine residency and domicile. And, there are a lot of people who have a quote unquote permanent residence, but that's not really where they domicile. And what I think part of the purpose of our proposed legislation is to make sure, for a variety of important reasons, that the property that is being used in this manner is truly the domicile of the person who's the owner.
So Bill, I'm just looking at the Rhinebeck law. I
Yeah.
think I've got it up anyway, and it looks like it's 16 days in any one calendar year and a 7-day period of no rental between rentals.
Oh, yeah, it's even tighter. than
Very
that.
restrictive.
It's
Right.
very restrictive.
I think that's a way of discouraging it in their community. And you know, that's a very different animal there. One,
This is village, not town.
That's the village,
Right.
that's the
exactly,
That's
it's
a
the
village,
village. So
right.
you do have a neighborhood, and the village was experiencing something which we haven't yet experienced on that scale. Folks buying up the homes, you know, solely for the purpose of just renting them out. And so you didn't have a neighbor to, you know, to walk with and talk with. So would be with 150, so you're left with 215 where you could reside. I mean, I'll leave it to you. I'm okay with either number 150 or 120.
Jacob?
Yeah, when I was thinking this through, it seemed like the 150 number is close to having a 3-day weekend, you know, every week, right? And I think that doesn't seem so unreasonable if we're permitting it, right? I think that the question you were raising about whether it's somebody's domicile or not, as you were talking, I was wondering whether that would impact the permitting requirements in terms of it being a primary residence. Is that something that would come into play if there was some sort of, you know, assessment that this wasn't somebody's domicile anymore? Would that affect other parts of the law? Like, I guess, like, I want to make sure that the law is not in conflict with itself, where it's permitting something that would take you out of eligibility.
Well, if it's not your domicile, then you wouldn't be eligible pursuant to the way this proposed legislation is. I think I get concerned that you create an invitation for something that becomes so permissive that then it may not be your domicile anymore. And, you know, you don't want to invite that. You know, a 3-day weekend every weekend of the year does seem a little.
I don't
I
think
mean-
that's what it would likely be, right? It would likely be many weekends, but then there'll be summer weeks, don't you think?
Yes,
Or you know, holiday weeks, or maybe, you know, it'll be a combination of weekly and weekend, I imagine, right? Isn't that the pattern that some of the folks who were renting out or going to rentals spoke about? Be a mixture, right?
Yeah, and I think that when I was saying it that way, I was thinking more of it as just a shorthand for thinking about
Yeah.
what that looks
Yeah.
like as a proportion of days. And, you know, I do think that people will be renting for, you know, a week at a time at some of these locations.
even 2 weeks.
I would note that, you know, the enforcement office is going to have to be enforcing these, and I think while the rule is primary residence / domicile, I think it will be an aid to them if they have a situation where the rentals were happening more than that. It would be easier for them to just say, look, you know, this is not right. This is not permitted. It
Right.
doesn't mean that it's, you know, that you don't have to meet the other test. It's just that this might make enforcement a little bit easier if you have a number, whatever the number is
Right.
that you're comfortable with,
Right.
right?
Well, the one thought I had is I would think that we might want to start out with a lesser number, but the whole thing, you know, get going, and if all's going well, it's easier to go up and adapt it for more nights than it probably would be to go backwards for more nights or less nights. So I guess I would be in favor of something less than 150, particularly if that might cause problems for people that they don't realize. If they say, the town says I can do 150, so I'll do 150. And, you know, maybe that causes problems, unforeseen problems with the domicile question. So we could, you know, just do something in between, like 135 or, you know, or less. My concern is what Chris just mentioned is I have a lot of concern around the enforcement for this. And I think it's going to take a lot of time. And we have to, I would like to make sure that the application fees are really going to cover the costs
Yeah.
of monitoring this, because I think, you know, it's going to be there's gonna be a lot going on here. If we have, 50 short-term rental places and they have to be checking them for, are they on our list? Do they have an application? A permit rather, if someone else calls and says, this place has been rented for 3 weeks in a row, so I just think it's going to be a lot of work, and we have to make sure that fees are going to cover the reality of the work that's going to go into it. And that, we may find down the road that we are going to have to add some hours to the enforcement folks so they can cover it.
Yeah. Agreed.
Fortunately, the county has a contract with, I think it's called Host Compliance.
Yeah.
And they allow municipalities to piggyback on their contract as long as you have a law in place to regulate short-term rentals. And what I understand about Host Compliance is if people are listing their short-term rental on any of the most regularly used, not just Airbnb and it's, I need a vacation, lots of them. And they do it in a real-time basis. So they're able to kind of gather information about locations and properties. And if our homeowners who choose to do this get the permit and have a permit number, because pursuant to our proposed legislation, that permit number has to be in any advertised listing, they'll be able to, like in terms of counting days, things like that, that should be done sort of in an automated way. Now, the back end, Chris, is the problem. Once you have that information,
Right.
and the
Then you have to
process
do
of
something
going
with it.
through writing letters, and if there's a potential violation, I mean, that's, that is certainly where the heavy lift is.
Right.
But in terms of identifying them, I think, and from my understanding from speaking to another municipality that uses it, it's a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great tool, but as you said, we're just going to get a lot of information from it. And then it's the question of what are you going to do with that information, and how long is it going to take you to do what you need to do with that information? And, and for the first year, I would think that it's quite possible that, people might not hear about this right away. They might apply later. Sometime in the year, they'll decide, oh, let's give this a try. So, when these permits are going to be coming in, the applications and the follow-up, I just think it's going to be a lot of detailed work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, let's see, I'm reading through it and I don't think I noted the section. But there's a section that talks about if the property is on a shared driveway.
Yeah.
And that there would need to have agreements from everybody on the driveway for this. So number one, I think that's an example of, a black pit of time to deal with these things from our enforcement people. And number two, I don't think that should be in there. A shared driveway is not a public road, so we don't really have any authority over that. I mean, they should have a shared driveway agreement in place, but I don't think that we also want to get drawn into arguments between neighbors on shared driveways when it's not a public road and we have no say over it otherwise.
Okay, so that was a provision in the original version from the committee. They didn't want to allow any STRs on shared driveways, and we added the provision to allow it if there was a consent. But your proposal, I gather, is to just take that restriction out altogether from the supplementary regulations, correct?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Mhm.
Maybe Bill O'Neill can give us a bit more background on what the thinking was. Or Bill.
Well, the thinking was how it would impact on the neighbors. And that where you have shared driveways, you will have a lot of problems. And that we didn't want to give them more problems by having, frequent guests coming to an Airbnb on the shared driveway.
Well,
I don't know that it has to be restricted. Am I wrong, Bill?
no, you're not wrong. But, in looking at the zoning map, though, the two areas that were being permissive, the 3 and the 5, there are many homes that are on private roads and shared driveways. And it seems like, to me, it creates sort of two classes of people. Now, I think there's a way to deal with it, Christine, and one way to deal with it is that in any application to do this, you have to provide a copy of a written agreement where all the parties say that they're okay with this. And if they don't, then you don't get the permit. I mean, that's not a heavy lift. What becomes a heavy lift is if you do it. But if you're providing an application, presumably our staff are going to be reviewing the application. They're going to know where the plot is. They're going to know exactly where it's located. And if it's on a private road or a shared driveway, and that's not a part of the application, Bob or somebody would contact the applicant and say, well, I need a copy of a agreement among all the members that this is acceptable. I agree with you. It's not a public road and we can't be enforcing and involved in that. But that is a way to maybe provide more parity, if you will, because there are so many homes in the 3 and 5 that go up the end of a private road.
I'm in agreement with Christine on this one. I'm not sure we want to be in the business of regulating private driveways and the use and who can use it. And I do think it's going to be, again, burdensome. We're trying to take away any unnecessary burdens. I think that your planning board experience, Christine, I think is very helpful here, because I think you've approved, I'm sure, many a project, and including shared driveways. And I just think that that's sort of fraught with getting in the middle of something that they need to work out themselves. I am concerned that there could be an increase of unknown vehicles going down shared driveways. So I do think that folks should be mindful of that, and certainly discuss with their neighbors that there may be an increase in that usage.
I tend to agree with that as well. I think that I'm on board with what Christine proposed in terms of removing this part of the proposed law.
Another question I had was reading through this. So we're now proposing, this is just proposed, to not have a category anymore of B&Bs, bed and breakfast, because I guess the thinking is that they would be covered as it would be a short-term rental. And I read it a couple times, and I think there is a difference between a bed and breakfast and a short-term rental, right? Where the bed and breakfast, the owner or manager or whatever, right? There is food being prepared and food being served, at least at breakfast. And that seems to be being deleted. That option is being deleted from this. And if you have a current B&B operation, the proposal is that you have, I think it's 2 years to close it or change it to an STR or whatever you want to do. And I guess I'm just not sure that we want to take out bed and breakfasts as a viable option.
So Christine, I think that the way that I'm reading the STR provision, if you look at the supplementary regulations, it says only overnight accommodations, only residential occupancy, and no luncheons, banquets, et cetera, no restaurant, no meals to guests other than to rental occupants of the STR. So I don't think that there's a restriction on serving meals to the people who are staying at the residence. I think the restriction is on serving other people as a restaurant. So go to
Page 10.
What section are you looking at?
Yeah.
So that's on page 10, Chris.
Page
and I'll
10,
put it up
right.
on the screen here. It's
So
section F,
there-
I believe.
There is a
Oh, there's
distinction.
a couple of Fs there, but well,
Yeah, right. There is a distinction. So that would be the incidental, and let's see.
right there. Overnight accommodation.
yes, that's it, right.
This is supposed to be G here, just so you know.
Yeah, we fixed that, I
make
think,
that
in the
correct.
next version. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. So Christine, I think there is a distinction. There is a sign that's permitted for a B&B, which is not permitted for the STRs. So that's one of the distinctions. And I think that the most recent version of the use table, this no longer has a special permitted use. I think the primary difference was that the B&Bs were permitted. I want to say they were permitted in the Hamlet district, and you're not permitting STRs in the Hamlet district, right? I got that right, Robert?
That's correct, yeah.
That's
So
correct.
that
Yeah.
would be a distinction. So if somebody had a current B&B in the Hamlet, that would be a provision that, at least as proposed, the amortization period would apply to. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand what you're saying, but again, okay, so there was a number of versions that came through today.
Right, yes,
And
exactly.
in the later ones, I did not have any, I could not find any red line version. So it's unclear, to really, I didn't do a
Here's the-
side-by-side thing.
here's
But
the
in
one-
one of the versions, it deletes the definition of bed and breakfast. So
It
did-
does,
That's
yeah.
correct, that's correct.
So if there's not a
That's correct.
definition for it, then.
So there is no bed and breakfast, but the STR, I mean, I guess by definition, the STR says no restaurant and no meals to guests other than rental occupants of the STR. I mean, if we want to be more clear and say they're allowed to serve, meals to, health department, permitting, from the zoning perspective, they would be allowed to serve meals to the occupants, the rental occupants. Is that what you would want to do, is be clear about that? I think that's permitted for any STR.
I mean, it does seem to say, Christine, you're not okay with this language here?
Well, the F, the two
Yeah.
Fs, which F, the first F or the second
First
F?
F, sorry, yeah, it's
First
just.
step, we did fix that in a
Okay,
correction, yeah.
so no restaurant may be operating, no meals may be prepared other to guests other than to rental occupants of the STR. I mean, that seems to
Served,
be
served, yeah.
fairly clear, no?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe I was looking at an earlier version, but I just think we should make it clear that we're not, because when I saw that we were deleting the definition for bed and breakfast, but then later on, there's a statement where you have to meet the county's requirements for bed and breakfast. And then, I just want to make sure that we're not
So, right, Michelle added. the provision-
outlying.
Right, Michelle added the provision on the counties, I think, because from a sanitary code perspective, they would define something as a B&B, and that could require certain things from a county sanitary code perspective. So she wanted to make sure that if it's applicable, that someone would be required to comply with those provisions of the county code.
Okay, well,
It's,
maybe,
different definition, I think it is
Right.
confusing from that perspective, right?
right.
Yeah.
So maybe we can look at the definitions that we have now and just clarify that this
Maybe in
would
that section, we should
include
say,
bed and breakfast.
right, well, maybe in that section, we should say applicable to bed and breakfast establishments as defined by the county. So just to make that clear, and I guess, we're deleting bed and breakfast. I mean, unless you are saying you want to have short-term rentals be defined to include a bed and breakfast.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It just sounds like it's
Interesting.
duplicative to me. But
Well, a B&B is
These are
essentially a type of
pretty
hosted
hefty
STR.
regulations.
Right,
If you're an owner or thinking about doing short-term rentals,
yeah,
I think the clearer we can make it, the better it will be for the users.
so I think I would do that in the supplementary regulations where we are right now, and I think maybe the thing to do would be in that F section to say, meals served to, just expressly say meals served to, the permitted rental occupants of the STR, as in a bed and breakfast, are permitted, and just say it explicitly. Would that address it?
Potentially. I guess I'm also trying, thinking of, I think we have at least one. No, I know the other one shut down during COVID, but, we have at least one place that is has more than 4 rooms. You know, it's a real bed and breakfast and it has more than 4 rooms. So
And is it in which district is that?
I don't know off the top of my head. But anyway, so we'll have to, I just think we need to do some more work on the definitions and think more about with bed and breakfast in mind.
And Christine, just so you know, that and Bill can speak to this, the rationale, but the view of what the task force did was always that the short-term rental law would replace the bed and breakfast law.
Right.
Okay.
And I guess if it gets,
I don't think you can have a B and B with more than 4 bedrooms.
Well, not under this, right?
Well,
No, no,
you
under our
couldn't.
old law.
You couldn't
Oh.
under pre-existing. It was 4 bedrooms or less anyway.
That's correct.
So I don't know
Then
what
they're
you're
a
talking
hotel?
about, Christine.
They could be a hotel or an inn,
Maybe they're
right?
into the hotel or inn then instead. Okay.
Yeah. I'm okay
It
with
would
that.
not be a B and B.
Yeah. I'm okay with the language as modified by Chris. Christine, is there more? Because I don't want us to get past your common driveway thing without making that change. If folks are okay with that,
I'm okay with that.
you're okay with that? Can we go to that part of the,
So there are 2 sections I think we'd want to look at. One is in 112-3D. In the
Yeah.
application, we would delete the reference to requiring a copy of any written agreement regarding the use of a private road or shared private drive. And
okay,
then,
hang on,
yeah,
there. Right there.
maybe I've got you in front of my screen there.
D,
D 10 is what I've got. These got renumbered in my final version.
D10,
Yeah, there you go.
copy of any written agreement regarding the use.
Right,
of-
so you would delete that,
Yeah,
okay? And then in section, in the Article 5 supplementary regulations, back on about page 10 or so,
okay.
and I'm looking at a slightly different version than I'm going to project.
I think it's paragraph D.
Robert, should I project the one that I'm working on, or is that,
Sure, I thought.
With the
I thought
map
I had the
amendment?
same- I thought I had the same one.
do you have the one with the, no, you don't think so, because do you have the one with the map amendment issue? Does yours still have a map amendment? It doesn't seem like you have the update.
Try page 10, Robert. You're on 11.
Yeah, no, you don't have the final version. We deleted a provision.
Okay, then why don't you do the screen share then?
Let me see if I can do it. Let's see, screen share, okay, screen 2. Let's try this. Now, I can't see what you're seeing, so,
We are seeing you're on 112.3. And
Okay.
it begins at the bottom page 112.4.
okay, so let me take you to the second place where we were talking about, which is in the supplementary regulations. So this is the supplementary regulations in Article 5, section, pardon me?
It's D.
Oh, I just went a little too far.
One,
Hang on. This is a very fussy little screen.
there you go.
There we go.
No
So we would
SDR is allowed
delete,
on
we
those.
would delete D. Okay,
Yeah,
for Christine's comments.
yeah,
And then we would edit, let's see, we would let it edit F there with the additional clarification about quote unquote B and B. So it wouldn't be the defined term bed and breakfast. It would be, you know, a typical bed and breakfast is what we would say.
Okay.
Does that
okay,
make sense?
all right.
Generically. So Robert, can we scroll through this version and look at the map edit discussion that I don't think the board members saw?
Right,
The
so,
late
in-
change?
yeah,
wanna
so
discuss
in
that?
lieu, yeah, in lieu of doing an overlay, just have the language encompass that. And basically, there you go. Farm stay SDR and SDR, whether hosted or unhosted on property in the AB district, and which may include an adjacent RD3, RD5 parcel operated as part of the same farm, subject to the conditions set forth in this chapter. And so this
Now
would
we'll
be
go down
more
to
limited
that.
opportunities. It would need to meet the minimum lot requirements under the
There you go.
code.
Right here.
And in addition to that, that there would be a cap under 6.4, amending it by inserting the following new subsections, redesigning the current subsection so that a portion of the bedrooms permitted for a farm stay STR may be located on a parcel that is RD3 or 5 zoning district that meets the minimum lot area specified for the district, even if the development is clustered and shares a common border with the AB zoning district parcel. So it would only be adjoining parcels and part of the agricultural operation as a farm stay. So it's more limited in scope. In this way, you wouldn't have to go through that burdensome map amendment.
So this draft deletes the, I'm just going to go back up here, deletes the amended zoning district map. And so then it renumbers the subsequent sections accordingly. I just want to point that out. And I know that we went through quite a few versions of this, so, but
All right, and there you have another section you're going to
that's just a renumbering.
renumbering, okay.
Right, that's just renumbering and cleanup.
Okay. Can we talk about, well, you're at the end, Chris,
Yes,
while
at
you're
the
at
end.
the end, can
Yes.
we discuss the effective
date?
date?
Yeah.
Please? Okay. So there are a couple of issues surrounding effective date of the law. Obviously, we're going to get a bunch of applications coming into our building zoning department, and we'll need time to process those applications and to ensure that these activities are permitted. And so we'll need to have an effective date that will reflect the reality of that. So right now we have in there 6 months, and that would give that department time. In fact, it may be a good time to do it during the winter when it's a little bit slower in the building and zoning department. Things tend to pick up after the snowfall in April. So what do you all think about 6 months? Any other questions or thoughts about that?
So that would mean it would be starting somewhere late May or June next year?
Yeah, let's say the law is passed late November, early December, something like that, then 6
Right.
months from that point.
I think it's good because it also gives us time to educate the public.
Okay,
Mhm.
And I
well,
think
sure. I
because
mean,
they
I
can-
think
Go ahead.
I think at some point, one of the committees had a list of folks who were doing short-term rentals. I mean, obviously, we'd want to mail to those folks. I think that would make our lives easier if we did a mailing to folks that we know that we're doing, or at least heard once upon a time were doing. I mean, obviously, the properties could have changed hands and so on and so forth, but
I think it would be useful to have an application document that has a little bit of an introduction to,
Yeah.
how this works and lays out the information that needs to be provided, and then you can put that same information on your website if you want to create a page for it.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's something we should work on, provided we're set with this. I think it was something we could work on now, but between now and our public hearing, is at least start the work on an application and make sure that we've got something that's ready to go when this is adopted. So we do have we have some seeker work. Should we do some seeker work, folks? Or are we?
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes, Jacob, please go right ahead.
Great. So on page 4, section 112.4, for the 1-year exception for the unhosted registered STRs, in section B, there's a provision that says a property owner may not have an outstanding one-time registration and annual operating permit at the same time.
Yes.
I guess I'm curious whether that's intended to prohibit those who have an annual operating permit from the one-time exception for an unhosted STR if they're already hosting or doing hosted STRs with their annual operating permit. It seems like it kind of removes that permittance for the people that are otherwise permitted to hold, an STR in their zone.
Okay. That's a good question.
I think that was a provision that just came from the committee, and their original provision when we had all these different classes was that you could only have one class or type, but I think it's a fair question for consideration. That was a committee input.
I guess for me, it just seems like if we have people who are hosting STRs, like they're doing the hosted version of it, and they're otherwise following the law, right? They're doing a good job. We don't have any reason to expect them, to otherwise with an unhosted STR to be doing anything, wrong, I guess. It seems like it's kind of prohibiting them from doing something when otherwise they're fine.
They're allowed to do. They have to choose one or the other. Yeah. So that makes perfect sense to me, Jacob. The other thing I would say is we just maybe want to have some language. Chris, can we get some language that doesn't allow the exception period to be added on? Or maybe we don't need that because we're keeping it at a certain amount of days. Per annum.
How many days did you end up with?
Well, I think we're still at 150. I didn't hear a consensus to move that number yet. But that's something we can put out to the public and maybe get some input on.
I'm kind of thinking if you want to have a public hearing, well, I don't know. I think we need to.
What?
The risk
been
of-
moved?
I
It's
think
been moved?
Bill Hamel made some good points, so I would be in favor of reducing the number. Like I
Well,
said, I
one
think we
time.
we can go up later if everything's going fine, but it's hard to reduce.
Okay.
And compared to the village of Rhinebeck, 120 is
good.
extremely permissive. I want to address Jacob's comment though, real quick.
Sure.
If there are additional requirements for unhosted as opposed to hosted. So what I would say is, I agree with you. If somebody got a permit to do unhosted and they're in the 3 and 5, there should be no reason why they should have to go get it. In other words, that should be sufficient for a hosted scenario. However, if you're only doing hosted, the additional requirement, like having a person within 15 miles, there are some additional things about having it be unhosted that would have to be somehow approved or taken care of. So it's just an observation.
Yeah,
Well,
I think that my reading of this, just from that section B where it says you may not have an outstanding one-time and annual operating permit, I don't think there's a problem with having them do the same things that are required for unhosted listings or having an unhosted STR. I just think that if you are typically hosting an STR, you have a hosted STR, that you shouldn't be forbidden from having the unhosted version of it for the one-time
So
exception.
you could apply for both permits. In other
Yes.
words, a permit and a registration.
Yes.
Yeah, I that makes perfect sense to me, Jacob. I don't know how others feel, but yeah, it would seem to be.
So
more
that
important.
would delete the second sentence in B there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Jacob, you said there was another thing you wanted to discuss.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the, I guess on page 7, The penalties for offenses, this is in the section 112.6, enforcement and administration.
So let me go to
D.
that on here, Jacob, because
Yep.
I'm not, we did make a change in one of the later versions today. So let me just go to that to try to bring them into compliance with the zoning code. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble moving my document. There we go. Okay. So enforcement, do you want the violations or do you want the later provisions, the penalties?
The penalties,
Yep,
section
okay.
D.
So we changed that to be consistent with the provisions for the zoning code, or roughly consistent with the provisions for the zoning code.
Chris, is it possible for you to make that a little bigger?
I can try, yes, I can try. Okay, there we go. How's that?
Ah, much better. Okay.
There we go.
Yep, and that section 1 is the one that I was going to ask about. So
Right.
for all of these, for succeeding, subsequent violations, they all include the language imprisonment for not more than 6 months. And I'm wondering whether there's a reason that that's included, if that's something that...
So again, we just borrowed the language from the zoning code, which is actually taken from the statutory authorization for the zoning penalties. That is essentially misdemeanor level violations. I mean, it's unlikely that, it's what makes it a criminal penalty, and Bill Hamill's gonna weigh in a minute here, but
That would be unfortunate.
it's what makes it, it's a criminal level penalty. Remember that we have, I just want to go backwards for a minute. We have three means of enforcement, right? So first we have an administrative process, which is essentially issuance of violation notices and suspension of permits and so forth. So that's an administrative process, right? Which we would expect, for the most part, would be successful in achieving compliance, right? So the alternative for seeking essentially justice court remedies would be fairly unlikely, I would think. But it's occasionally something that we've had to do in certain situations. And then, of course, we have another alternative, which is to seek an injunction in a proper case. But those are the typical set of remedies that we would be looking for in this kind of enforcement regime. So again, it's unlikely, I think, for this kind of thing that we would be seeking those penalties. But again, we have occasionally had to go to justice court,
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering whether imprisonment has to be included to make justice court an option.
It's a criminal level violation.
It's like
And again, I'm trying to-
conduct.
Right, I'm trying to make it consistent, Jacob, with the zoning violations, which again
Yeah.
are based on the statutory zoning penalties.
And that's kind of why I was asking, trying to figure out the reason that was included, because it feels extreme for something like this, right? And I guess my reading of it is that I personally am disinclined to include something like that where it's not an appropriate punishment or penalty for this sort of violation in my own view, right? This is me, like my personal views on this, right? It just feels excessive for something this, right?
So keep in mind in a zoning context, I'm trying to think of a situation where you might be seeking that. But if I had somebody who was, for example, running a rental housing unit that was completely in violation of building code and, essentially refusing to bring property into compliance and, putting people at risk, you'd have a situation there where you could potentially seek those kinds of penalties. It's very uncommon, but that's why these penalties exist for those extreme situations.
I know of one example where that happened, where somebody illegally built an accessory dwelling, and the town went through all the processes administratively to try to remedy that, and the property owner was just intransigent, and ultimately, it required going to that level. And I agree with Chris. It's highly unusual, but you have to have it for that rare occasion.
I've only heard of something like this in instances where it's involved something like dumping on property, which is, both a zoning violation and probably a DEC and otherwise, but.
Yeah, I guess like to me, it seems like those sort of penalties would fall under other zoning violations, right? It wouldn't necessarily be in the short-term rental portion of it. And it seems like the other avenues, like, filing for an injunction, going that route seems like a more appropriate approach than imprisonment.
Again, it's a bundle of rights that the town would have, to seek enforcement, and we would, in terms of the appropriate approach, of course, the first thing that as I said, we would recommend is that you seek compliance in the first instance by educating the public and providing website information and applications and so forth. And then we have the administrative, remedy procedures that we would ordinarily pursue. So.
Well, having, on the planning board, we did have times where there were violations, and the permissible fines as outlined were so low that they were not an impediment to the situation. So I think having that option available, if it's needed, is important, because other ways you can't get the enforcement. And I think that probably also the judges would prefer to have more ability in their sentencing to make, hopefully to be making the point that if it happens again, we can elevate to this sort of thing. But, it does take a long time to get there, to get to justice course in the first place. But sometimes, unfortunately, you do need to have something that makes an impression.
Right.
Go
Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say that the level of these fines, from what I've seen from Airbnb listings for certain homes, that's one night. So it's not, someone might be able to recover that fine with just doing one more night. And
Well,
so
I don't think that's what we have here, or something that's.
well, $350. People get that for one night in a short-term rental, and in the summer, like a full house, I've seen $700-800. So that fine, as Christine said, I mean, it may not be an impediment.
Yeah, but
And I guess I would advocate for, if that's the concern, that the fine's not high enough, because it's listed. It's not a, you get this fine, right? It says not more than, or wait, sorry, is it? Yeah, not more than.
Not more than.
Yeah, so you can set your ranges, right? And I guess the concern that I have is, you say, oh, the judges will have the ability to use that as a potential, punishment that they give out for something like this, right? And I think my concern is that, maybe right now we're not concerned that our town justices would do that, right? That they wouldn't, jump to that immediately. But you could also see a situation where you end up with a justice that does something like that, right? And that's within their power. And it's not something that I think is appropriate, at least for, the first violation or the second violation. It doesn't feel appropriate to me. And I think that if we wanted to include that, it makes more sense to do that, on the more extreme examples where somebody is violating this repeatedly.
Escalating.
Yeah. And to me, like, for the first violation of this, not more than $350, and imprisonment of not more than 6 months for a first offense, I don't want to give a justice that power. That doesn't seem appropriate.
right. Yeah, I agree.
So
Unless there's a
can I
reason
just,
to do it. That doesn't
can I
feel
just say
right.
one more time, Jacob, I understand where you're going with this, but what I will say is that our zoning code right now is based on what the statutory authorization is. And this permit process is tied in completely with the permitted uses. So if you don't have a permit, then you're violating the zoning code too. So whether we bring it that way or not, you're already going to be violating the zoning code. And unless you're suggesting we go back and change the whole zoning code, which I think, we have a bundle of rights for all zoning violations, regardless of what they are. So you're going to be, figuring out what's the appropriate, remedy for an egregious violation as opposed to, maybe a more limited one that you're going to try to resolve with an administrative remedy,
Yeah,
Um,
and I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, right? Is where that already exists. I'd rather not stack it where it's not necessary.
But this is the same thing, is my point.
Yeah.
If you don't have a permit, you're going to be in violation of the zoning code, right?
So, yeah, but Chris is saying that we have to make changes that will apply to more than just this. If you want to make changes, and it's not a bad idea. I think we should revisit that, Jacob. I'm just not sure right here, right now with this one legislation. I think we should revisit it. Excuse me.
I guess like my question is, I don't see the harm of removing the imprisonment sections for first, second, third.
So Jacob, I don't think that
Yeah.
if we're gonna, it's not helpful because we already have these provisions in the zoning code. And unless you're gonna go and change the zoning code and remove those provisions for all violations in the zoning code, where you need to think about whether or not that's something that you want to do.
Well, I think we need to research this further because again, at previous times on the planning board, when we were really asking for harder penalties, and we were told that this was not an option, that it was only the fines and that was it. So I think we need to dig deeper into this.
Let's-
One potential remedy though, Jacob, and it was the other question that I never got to, which is down in paragraph 3, right below there, where it
Okay.
talks about if you're convicted of this violation, you automatically forfeit your permit or registration. Many, many violations and crimes have a period of debarment upon a conviction for a violation. And it seems to me,
Chris, did you want to address that? Because
I was just going to say, to get to the
It's in
place
here.
where you're talking about, Jacob, where, say after your conviction, you were barred for 1 year, but then you did it again. To me, that puts you right back, that moves you up a few notches almost automatically. And so I'm not sure why we would allow somebody who's convicted at the end of their 1 year period, then to reapply. I don't think we could necessarily deny them if they did all the things they were supposed to do.
So we have working with some provisions that were recommended by the committee and modifying them just a bit because we can't work with just violations. We have to work with a violation that wasn't remedied. But
Right.
bear with me, I just need to find the section where this is applicable. I think it's in the operating standards. I think it's D here. So what we came up with in terms of looking at what the committee wanted was an annual operating permit and registration can't be issued if there's an outstanding notice of violation. And you'll notice that there's a process in the administrative provisions to appeal the notice of violation to a hearing officer, so that we have an opportunity for somebody who feels that they were inappropriately sent a notice to appeal that. But if there's an outstanding notice of violation, then that would be a hold on a permit issuance. And if somebody was suspended or revoked and remains uncured, they don't get a permit. And if it was suspended or revoked, it looks like I'm missing the word "or" there. For 2 or more times during the 2-year period before the year applied for. So in 2020 and 21, you had suspensions and revocations 2 or more times, then you're not going to get a 2022 permit. Now, there's variations on that theme, but we were looking for something that would be straightforward to enforce and would be reasonable in terms of a period of time.
That's to Bill Hamel's question.
Yes, correct. And Bill, I don't know if this is what you were looking for.
No, it gets there.
So let's put a question mark there. Jacob, did you have some other points you want to discuss?
No, I think that's basically it. I guess I had a pedantic sort of thing about just the term unhosted and whether we could remove the hyphen from that and just keep it unhosted as one word. but
Ah.
that's not substantive in any way. It was just something that as I was reading it, it felt, I don't know, like, I feel like when I see it, it's usually just UNH instead of UN or UN-H. So it's not really important, not
You're right on
substantive.
that.
Yeah.
I think you're right on that, and I would like to work with you, Jacob, after this to take a look at some of that language about. Yeah,
Yeah, we do need to look at it. I think he's raised a good point.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I guess I just would like to make more, sort of one general point is that, I realize that we already have short-term rentals happening in Red Hook, in both the village and the town.
Yeah.
But, we just don't know what the impact of this new law may be if it passes after a public hearing.
Yeah.
On our housing market.
Yeah.
And we already have a very difficult and tight housing market. And the affordability of our housing market is particularly in the last 18 months or so, I think it is really gotten difficult. And for folks who live in Red Hook and want to stay in Red Hook, people starting out, maybe looking for your first apartment, young families want to move into the area, we really are going to have to take a hard look at affordable housing in the town and what we can do for that. And I think, affordable housing tends to have a bad connotation, but it's really a question of, just general affordability. The average price of housing has risen exponentially here, rents along with that, and the availability of places to rent is not what it once was either. So I just would like to say that this is something we need to move on, and it has to do with the housing market, but there are larger issues of our housing market that we really need to address.
That's right. And by the way, we're about to have our third meeting now on the county-sponsored housing affordability study, most of it pre-pandemic, but the pandemic is almost easy to add on to what the study results are. And I'll hope to have something to share with you in late December to that point, Christine. But yeah, anybody who's been anywhere besides under a rock knows that the prices have really escalated, rents included. So we'll take a look at that. All right, before we get to the seeker work, are we drawing straws here on the number of days? I did want to note, we did have it at 180 at one point. It's down to 150, but I'm hearing maybe 120. What's your pleasure, folks?
I'm okay with 120.
I'm okay with 120.
Jacob?
I'm okay with 120.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't really have a strong preference. I don't have any problem with 150. 120 doesn't seem,
okay.
too restrictive either. So if that's what everybody else is in favor of, that's fine by me.
Okay, I would prefer 150, but 120, it sounds like it is. So why don't we make that change?
Got it?
Okay. I think we covered. Any other comments before we get to the seeker work? Any other changes, potential changes? Christine's got good corrections there. All right, why don't we jump to our seeker work? Let's do.
So,
Our EAF.
right, we did make a revision to the EAF, but I think that, so can you project the one that you had, and I may just suggest an emendation?
Hang on.
Oh, actually, why don't you let me share this screen? Because I think this is what we want to use. May I?
You
On
may.
that attachment, and then you can show the main one.
You may.
All right, let me show this, because this is a description of the action. Okay, so in the in the part 1 EAF that Robert's going to show, we've just made an edit to the description of the action. The EAF was prepared by Michelle to include a reference to conforming changes to remove references to B and Bs that we've discussed, and a reference to the class 1 home occupations to be allowed in the WC, because that was a conforming change that was proposed. And then a reference to the certain STRs being allowed in RD&R 5 parcels adjacent to farms in the AB, so that those things would be taken into account in our evaluation. Okay. And then the same change. Let me see if I can get this to come up without. No, just a second. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just get the other CAF up. There we go. Sorry, that's the problem when I'm trying to do 2 screens here. Just 1 second. Just want to make sure you have the right thing in front of you. Okay, there we go. All right. Now we just need to share that. And that should work. Okay, so you can see the, whoops, that's not it. I don't think that's what we want. Sorry. Thought I pulled it up. Okay, there we go. All right, do you see a coastal assessment form?
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
great.
So
So
we
we
could make
made
it a little bigger. That would be good for the people at
You
home.
betcha.
Thank you.
You betcha. How's that? So
Much better.
the CAF edit that we made to the one that was in the package is just, it's again, to make that same conforming change, and I highlighted it here as you can see it, right?
Mhm.
So then, Robert, we can go back to your packet to look at the rest of the materials if you would like.
I think you were doing great with the screen share, Chris. I wouldn't want to take that away from you. And
That's
now
all right.
I'm gonna need to go and get it myself. So we did the attachment, the CAF.
Yeah, we need the original EAF. If you can go back to
Yeah.
your packet, I think we need to
Yeah.
just scroll through the packet
Yeah,
and hit those things. And then we can do the resolution.
we are all the way down on page. Oh. I'm getting there. I think I'm getting there.
Well, the EAF is on 132. What are you looking for?
That's where I am.
Coastal forms on 146, I think.
So we've done. Here's part 1 EAF. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay. Just want to correct that email address. There's a typo on that. Okay. The attachment we've done. Right, we've covered that.
Yep. That's what Chris just did. Yep.
Okay, government approvals, Part B. Governmental entities. Is it within the coastal area? Yes, we've covered that. Consistent with adopted land use plans, yes. Is the site, the proposed action within? Let's change the screen here a little bit. There we go. It's a little better. Is the within the coastal, is the project site within a coastal erosion hazard area? No. Planning and zoning, consistent. We go down to C. Is it located wholly and partially within an area listed in the adopted municipal open space plan? Of course. Both the town, the villages, and Tivoli plan, adopted 2006. Consistent with the county's ag and farmland protection plan and chapter 72 of the town code, right to farm. Project details, obviously this is not a project. We can skip right on down all the way to. All these are activity related, site and setting of proposed action, yada, yada, yada. So, since it's not an activity, it doesn't have those impacts. See, the pages are a little bit out of order there, apologize. And that's pretty much it. We've covered the coastal assessment form. So next would be to classify the action. And we do have a resolution to that effect. This is now, Deanna, are we on 92, 93? We've lost
We
Deanna.
are on 84.
84,
No, oh wait,
83, I'm sorry. 83?
83.
83, thank you. Well, I was only off by 10.
Hey, you just did a lot of business there.
Thank you. Thank
Filling
you.
up the shadow docket there, Robert.
Okay, so where is this resolution? What page is that on? Boy. Oh, it was near the beginning, wasn't it? Okay, we're gonna do some mad scrolling, as they say. Look at that. There we are. Now, Chris, this was modified, yeah?
The resolution, I don't think was modified.
Okay, so it needs to be on the back, number 5, since we're not doing a map amendment.
Oh, right, yep. No, we haven't done that, so we'll have to do that on the fly. Let's see. So bear with me. I have it here, so let me just recommend the amendments.
I think we just remove it, right? Number 5.
Yeah, I just want to see if there's anything else. Let's see. So we will, so we are authorizing execution of the EAF CAF. We are determining type 1, declaring lead agency, holding a public hearing that would still be applicable, publishing notice of a public hearing, date to be determined by the board, and then the number 5 would be deleted, I guess. And number 6 would then become number 5. And that referral to the planning board still is applicable.
Right.
And the LWRP, so both for their recommendations as a zoning amendment and for the recommendations regarding consistency.
Right. And if we can go back to 3, I mean, I would put a time of maybe 7:35 in that blank spot there.
Mhm.
Okay, so we have classifying the action and establishing a date for a public hearing regarding the adoption of local law G proposed of 2021 regarding short-term rentals, and the date, since we've now moved, our next meeting would be November 30th. That's 7:35. So that's 3 weeks from today. So that gives a good amount of time to publish, get the word out there, get input from the public on the draft. And then the referrals, as Chris mentioned. So it's a proposed form of local law G entitled establishing a new chapter 112 of the code of the town of Red Hook to be known as short-term rentals, and to amend our zoning code, which is chapter 143 regarding short-term rentals and home occupation, since there's a slight modification to that as well in the process. Who would like to move resolution 83?
So moved.
Thank you, Bill Hamel. Is there a second? I'll second resolution 83. Why not? Further discussion? If not, all in favor, Bill O'Neill,
Yeah, aye.
Christine Kane,
Aye.
Jacob Testa.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you all very much. That's, and this information will be available in the town clerk's office. We'll put it on our website, obviously, so folks can take a look at it. And we welcome your input. All right, we did have, speaking of input, before we go into executive session to discuss the hire and fire of a particular individual, which we will do by conference call. Before we do that, we did have some communications in our correspondence folder from the planning board. I won't read the whole thing, but what they are suggesting, which some good thoughts here, is whether or not we want to amend our zoning in order to have some additional conditions as it relates to charging stations. And so there's a couple of issues about shielding the cabinets. There's electric cabinets that go along with these larger charging stations. We don't have one that's visible here. It's close to the building. But if you see them in other locations, it's like a large generator cabinet. If we want to do any screening regulations there, what do we want to do about lighting and signage that goes along with that? Because you need to have some signage to indicate that it's a charging station. And their recommendation as it relates to signage is to include that into the maximum signage for the property, which I don't know that that's possible, but that is what they're recommending. And then parking spaces, do the parking spaces count towards the required number of spaces or not? And so these are good recommendations that we should take a look at and consider as far as updating our code to reflect the new energy era. And the transition is happening then faster than people realize. Okay, anything else? I don't believe we have any public comments, any additional public comments. So at this time, we will bid the folks at home a good night. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to go into executive session to discuss the hire and fire of a particular individual, and we'll be back out if we take any action. Okay, very good. At this time, I'd like to make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, Bill O'Neill,
Aye.
Jacob Testa,
I seconded.
oh, Bill Hamel,
Aye.
Christine Kane. Thank you. very much.
Aye.
I appreciate it. Good night, everyone. And we'll put all our cameras and microphones on mute, folks, for the time being. Okay.
Am I in?
You're in.
You're in.
Am I in? Back in?
Yep.
Okay.
Did we lose Robert? What happened?
I think maybe he went to go take a nap or something, right?
He fell asleep.
Nodded out.
Hang on 1 second, folks.
Here he comes.
Does anybody know what we're waiting for?
We're waiting for Robert.
We're waiting for Robert to hop back on here.
Apologies, folks. I'm back. Had to take a little detour there. We are back from our executive session. At this time, I'd like to ask the board to authorize a temporary additional position. MEO,
So move.
Second.
okay, any further discussion? All in favor, Bill O'Neill,
Aye.
who's left? Christine Kane?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Okay, folks, thanks for your patience. And once again, good night. And we'll see you at our next town board meeting, November 30th at 7:30. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Aye.
Robert.
Bye-bye.